I mean, my kids are coming home from primary school asking me questions about, like, you spoke about that in primary school? Like, really? And so it's getting a bit crazy out there. But just like the first century Christians, when the world comes unstuck, our response is our first response always has to be, keep your heart right with God, resist temptation, come back to the Lord. And like, what I get a lot of, I hear a lot of people with a lot of conspiracy theories in our world. Now, you know I know about these because you guys send them to me. Right? And I get them in my inbox, I get them on Facebook chat, I get them in my inbox. And the thing is, just out of sheer curiosity, I click on them. And now the problem is my algorithm's just full of them, so it's throwing everything at me. Now, I don't know what's real and what's not. I mean, I deal in truth, and I know that I will receive a stricter judgment, as the scriptures say, for my role as a teacher. So I only want to deal in truth, and I can't work out what's what. And so, but all I know is that Christ is still on the throne. Jesus is still in charge, ruling and reigning over, the universe, over cultures, countries. He's still in charge, and none of this has caught him off guard. Okay. And so, just as the Epistle of James was relevant in the first century, it is just as important to us today. All right. So, establishing that, I'm going to zoom back into James 1:12. All right. If we can put that on the screen, for those of you that didn't bring a Bible. James chapter 1, verse 12. Blessed. There we go, we're back on. Now, I'm going to read from the King James Version, but if you've got the NIV there, it'll actually say preserves under trials. And if you have the English Standard Version, that one will say remains steadfast under trial. Now, that word blessed in the Greek, because James was writing in Greek, is the word makarios. Does anyone speak Greek here? A Greek speaker? Okay. So the word for blessed in Greek is makar. But this is the more poetic, sort of exemplified, emphatic version of, it's like you're really blessed. So makar is you're blessed. Makarios is like you're really blessed. And so the question here is, to be blessed, what do you need to do? So to be blessed, like who wants to be blessed? I'll take it. Like, yeah, for sure. Blessed is the man who endures. That word endures, in the Greek, is hopomeo, which means to remain. Remain, to undergo. It's also used to describe fortitude and perseverance. Right? So, if to be blessed, we need to endure. What do we need to endure? We need to endure temptation. Temptation. The temptation in how we respond to what's going on around us. Right? That word temptation is an interesting one because that's piermos, if I said it right. Perasmos, according to my lexicon on BibleStudy.schools.com. This literally means adversity, affliction, troubles. And that can be either sent by God or used by God in order to test and to prove one's character, faith, and holiness. It's a trial of a man's integrity, his virtue. Matthew uses this same word, piermos, when he's in chapter 4, when he's talking about Jesus in the desert with Jesus, how the devil tries to tempt Jesus into sin. It's like, yeah, good luck with that, right? And he tries to distract him from the call that he has on it. And that word, the parazo, is that he's trying to tempt him. And Paul also uses this word to describe in Galatians chapter 4 the trial in his flesh. Now, Paul uses the same word in 1 Corinthians 10:13. Can we have that verse on? This one. Now, no temptation has overtaken you except which as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able to endure. And he will also make a way to escape that you may be able to bear it. And that's piermos. Now, this verse is often used to promote a myth. And it's a myth, right? Ever heard this verse quoted and someone say, God doesn't give you more than you can endure? Have you ever heard that? Right? Has someone said, look, you're going through a rough patch and like, it's all right, God believes in you. You can get through this. He won't give you more than you can take. Now, I'll tell you this. I would say that I've not preached it wrong, just incomplete, okay? This particular one, okay? Will God give you more than you can endure? Of course he does. Of course he does. Who's been in a trial or a situation where you believe, like, my head is so far in the weeds, I can't get through this myself? Because you can't, okay? Because you need him, okay? So if you're in a situation, a circumstance where you feel you can't get out of this, right, whatever, the solution is God. Let me read that verse again to you. Verse 1 Corinthians 10:13. No temptation, no peramos, has overtaken you except such as is common to man. Ready? But God. God's now entering this verse. God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will also make a way of escape. God's in there with you, and he's going to make the way, all right, that you may be able to bear it. Whatever it is you're going through, if you can't find a way out, let God in there. All right, let God in there. The vision that you have for your life, if you feel God's put something on your heart that God's called you to, but it is sort of like outside of your natural ability, anything you think you can do, I couldn't do that possibly, you can't, because you need him. If you have a vision for your life that is not outside of your ability, like, this is what I'm saying, it needs to be so far out there that you can't possibly do it, because the gap between what you can do and what he can do is the God space that you've included him in it. Because if it's in your natural ability, you haven't included God. You haven't given him any room to move. And I believe that's when the pieramos that Paul dealt with in the flesh, I feel that God said, that's cool. My grace is sufficient because I'm going to carry you now. Because Paul was an amazing dude, and he spoke multiple languages, highly educated, and he was a gun, and he was doing a lot himself. But God's like, all right, slow down, cowboy. We're going to work together on this one. All right? So look at Abraham's faith. Like Abraham, he needed God. Moses and how he's dealing with Israel. Hezekiah and his sickness. All these fellas needed God to move. So at this point, it's clear. To be blessed does not mean the absence of trials, troubles, temptations. Not at all. But the person who is blessed is right in the middle of a storm of trials, adversity, persecution, temptation. Are we all in agreement right now? This is the same word that for blessed, the makarios, that Jesus himself uses in his Sermon on the Mount. Verse 10, right? Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sakes, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when the Lord gives you that car you've been praying for. No, it doesn't say that. I'm just saying it right. What it actually says in verse 11 is, blessed are you when they revile and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. And also in chapter 10, verse 22, he says, and that you will be hated for my name's sake, but he who endures, that's that word hopomeo, remains to the end, will be saved. All right. Can we go back to 1:12, James 1:12? It says there, for when he has been approved. This is a Greek word, dokimos. The dokimos is actually a financial term used in printing money in the ancient world. So back in the day, they used to press coins, but the technology wasn't that sharp that it used to have rough edges on the side. So what they would do is they'd actually sand them back. They'd actually shave them back and cut them back. And these coins that were used as currency, when they shaved them, obviously it was done by hand, so it wasn't perfect. So some shonky operators used to shave a little bit more off. Shave a little bit more. And they'll cut them a bit short. And then they take that metal and then melt that down and print some more money out of it. They're trying to stretch the money. So the actual weight of the coin, the value of the coin was based on the weight. But when that weight wasn't right, because they took a little bit extra metal and made some more coins trying to stretch it out, some integrous, honorable dealers would weigh the money and notice that it wasn't dokimos, that it wasn't the full weight of the money. It was a counterfeit. Because also the guys that were counterfeiting, they'd actually make them lighter than what they should have been. So that's where the term dokimos comes from. So when you've been approved, dokimos, and shown to be right, it says he will receive the crown of life. What is the crown of life? Once again, I looked at the Greek. because I'm a geek. It says, it's the word for crown in the Greek is Stephanos. Hence, if your name's Stefan, that's where your name comes from. It means it's used as crown, but it doesn't actually refer to a physical headdress in this context. But the word also, stephos, is a wreath for an athletic event. If you run a race and you win the prize in the ancient world, they would give you a little wreath that sat on your head, and that was called the stephos. And how you win this race, the Apostle Paul describes, I think, quite well in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 24 and 25. He says, "Do you not know that those who run the race all run, but one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you obtain it. And everyone who competes for the prize is temperate in all things. Now, they do it to obtain a perishable crown, but we for an imperishable crown." Then he goes to the Stephanos. So what is this crown? It's not an actual ornamental headdress that Christ gives us in the next life, but it's actually a symbolic representation of God's recognition for having spiritually triumphed in this life. The crown of life is God's rewards to those who love him and loyally preserve under trial. It doesn't signify a position or an authority, but of everlasting joy in the life to come. And the crown of life, the Stephanos of the word for life is Zoe. So if your name's Zoe, that's where your name comes from. Imagine it's like Stefano and Zoe get married. That's just a great thing to happen. Hey, you're Savone. Anyway, thanks for all jokes. It literally means life. And the word life is often used to show a relationship that is right with God. For Jesus himself says, "The thief does not come except to steal, to kill, and destroy. But I have come that they may have life, Zoe, and they may have it more abundantly." Jesus is everything we need. Jesus is everything we need. He's our life. He refers to himself in John 4 as our living water. In Matthew chapter 6, he's our bread of life. We know that our earthly lives will end, but we have this amazing promise that comes only to those who come to God through Jesus. 1 John 2, verse 25, it says, "And this is the promise that he has promised us, eternal life." Now, still working through this verse here, "which the Lord has promised to those who love him." It doesn't say to those that he loves, it's those that love him. All right? We know scripturally that God loves all mankind, even the most evil, despicable characters in history. That's a son of God or a daughter of God that something's gone wrong. They've left their father, they've gone the wrong way. And just like for you who are parents, when your kid does something stupid, you still love them, you're disappointed with them, but they're still your kid. That's how God deals with people like that. See, when you turn to God, you position yourself to receive his love. I will go as far to say that the agape love, God can't possibly love you anymore. He loves you perfectly already, everything about you. He couldn't love you any less, couldn't love you any more. He loves you agape, the unconditional, unrestricted love of the Father. But when you love him, you position yourself with him in his arms to receive from him. However, this verse I get a bit stuck on this verse, and I was asking the Lord, Father, I didn't get it. So if we position ourselves, then why do you love us and we love you, and why do we still need to be approved? Like, what's the approval bit? I come across 1 John 5:3. It says, "For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome." Let's stand firm in faith. The commands and the direction that God's given us is for our protection, for our benefit. It's keeping us safe. How do we get approved? We simply stand firm in the faith. We uncompromise. We're obedient. Let him do the work in us. God is making us more like him. God is preparing us for the purpose that he has. He's doing a work in us so that he can do a work through us. Then our character and our service will begin to reflect him.